Hello everyone, this is Nathanael Rutherford with Vol Basketball Fever here for another Vols matchup breakdown for another road game for Tennessee. It seems like they've been on the road a lot to start SEC play. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel while you're here. Please give this video a like, a thumbs up, I guess, whatever you want to call it. Hit that bell for notifications so you're sent notifications when we post new videos like this or a podcast as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Let's get right down to it. Tennessee plays Vanderbilt at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central Time, local time tip-off tonight. Oh boy, that is a late game. So if you're wanting to go to bed early, but also want to watch Tennessee, I'm sorry, you might want to record this game. But Tennessee is in Nashville, where a place that they've had a lot of success recently against Vanderbilt. More on that in a minute. But this Vanderbilt team, you might be thinking, okay, Vandy's Vandy, and they've been bad for the past few years. Well, this isn't the typical Vanderbilt team. This team is not half bad. I still expect Tennessee to win this game, but this is a different Vanderbilt team than you've seen in the last few seasons under Jerry Stackhouse. They actually have the top scorer in SEC right now, and one of the top players in the SEC is Scottie Pippen Jr., the preseason SEC Player of the Year. And right now he's actually surrounded by a decent cast of teammates this year and guys who've been able to score when he can't and provide other avenues of production that have really helped him out. Junior guard Jordan Wright is one of the main guys on the team that really helps out Scottie Pippen. You also have 6'10" Quentin Meloria Brown, his name's a mouthful, but he's a big guy as well, who's really kind of started to develop and be more of a rebounder for Vanderbilt now. And you also have Miles Stute, who's been a very effective three-point shooter and very effective scorer and kind of all-around guy for Vandy as well. The biggest difference, though, between this year's Vanderbilt team and the last couple years, or really last 4 or 5 years, has been the defense this year. They're only allowing 63.6 points per game on the season, which is on pace for their best defensive average since the 2014-15 team, 64.3 games. So they're right on par basically with that 14-15 team. So really the best defense in like 7-ish years for Vanderbilt. Their defense ranks 50th on KenPom in defensive efficiency, and they force a lot of turnovers, with opponents averaging 16.4 turnovers a game against Vandy. That's about 15 a game in SEC play. Their turnover percentage on defense ranks 19th in the country. And in SEC play, Vandy is averaging almost 9 steals per game. When they force at least 16 turnovers a game, Vandy is 7-3 this season, and they're only 3-3 when an opponent turns it over 14 times or fewer. So 7-3 when they have 16 or more, but they're only 3-3 when their opponent only has 14 turnovers or less in a game. So that's big key for Tennessee there is the turnovers. Offensively, though, Vandy's far from a top-tier program. They're not awful. They're definitely not going to be the worst offensive team Tennessee's faced this year or in the SEC. Their offense ranks 114th on KenPom, and they're averaging just over 70 points per game. It's not bad, but there's plenty of bad mixed in with the good on offense for Vanderbilt as well. They attempt a lot of threes, and they make a lot of threes. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch for Tennessee in this game. They average the second most threes attempted per game in SEC play at 26.8. So almost 27 three-pointers attempted per game in SEC play. And they've also almost made 10 per game, which is, I think, tops in the SEC. So shooting a lot of threes, making a lot of threes. Heading into SEC play, they were struggling to hit threes, but since they've gotten into conference play, Vandy has actually been pretty good at hitting three-pointers, connecting on 36.4% of their threes in 4 SEC games so far. Over a third of Vandy's points this season have come from three-pointers. 35.3% of their points have come on made three-pointers, which is 82nd in the nation. So again, that's a pretty good chunk. Tennessee's is actually a little bit higher at 36% of their threes. So you're going to have to expect a lot of threes in this game, I'd imagine. Both teams probably getting upwards of between 25 and 30 attempts in this game, and maybe it comes down to who makes more threes as to who wins. Some of the shooters to kind of keep an eye on for Vanderbilt from the three-point line. Miles Stute, who I mentioned earlier, shooting 40% on the year. Jordan Wright is making 34.4% of his threes on the season. And in SEC play, Trey Thomas has made 45.5% of his threes. So those are the main guys to kind of watch. Scottie Pippen will also, he'll attempt 5 or 6 threes a game, and he'll make a couple. So he'll also jack it up from 3 most of the time, most games. When Vandy makes at least 8 threes in a game this year, they're 9-3. And they're only 1-3 when making fewer than 8. So when they make at least 8, they're 9-3, but they're only 1-3 if they make less than 8 three-pointers in a game. They also like to draw a lot of fouls, and they like to get to the free throw line a lot. On the year, Vandy is averaging 20.5 free throw attempts per game. And that number is even higher in SEC play at almost 23 free throw attempts per game in SEC play. In fact, Vandy has 20.7% of their points that have come from free throws, which is one of the highest rates in the entire country. That's 42nd in the country in terms of percentage of your points coming from free throws. Scottie Pippen Jr. is the best at it, averaging almost 10 free throw trips a game in SEC play, and he makes 76.3% of them. So he's getting to the free throw line a lot in SEC play and making a lot of them, making about seven or eight in a game, just about almost every time he's out there on the court, it feels like. And speaking of him, he's obviously the main source of offense, main source of scoring most nights for Vanderbilt. He's dropped 20 plus points 7 times this season, and has had a couple of 30-point games, and he's been Vandy's leading scorer 8 times this season. But as I mentioned earlier, Jordan Wright has been a big asset, and he's also been a very good scorer for Vanderbilt this year. He's been Vandy's leading scorer 5 times this season. And actually, oddly enough, Vanderbilt actually has a better record this season when Wright scores 16 points or more in a game than when Pippen does. Vanderbilt is 4-1 this season when Jordan Wright scores 16 or more points, and they're only 5-5 when Pippen does that. So it seems like if they get too reliant on Scottie Pippen, Vanderbilt tends to lose. However, if Wright steps up and has a really good offensive game, it seems like Vandy's had a lot more success this year. When Pippen scores 15 or fewer points, this is also weird to think about too, they're 5-1. So when he scores 16 or more points in a game, Vandy's 5-5. They're 5-1 when he scores less than 15 points, or 15 points or fewer. So again, if they become overly reliant on Scottie Pippen, it seems like Vandy's had more trouble winning this year than when they've had more of an even spread things out type of offense. They do run kind of a slow tempo, which is, again, that's going to be interesting. Tennessee likes to run a little bit, likes to create turnovers and get in transition and get fast break buckets if they can. Their tempo ranks only 249th on KenPom and adjusted tempo, and their average time of possession on offense, their average possession length is 18.1 seconds, which ranks 267th. So they aren't the slowest team you'll ever see, but they certainly are not very fast and like to hold on to the ball until about that 12 to 8 second mark left on the shot clock. Most possessions are more of a half-court offense than what Tennessee runs now. Vandy's played a pretty tough schedule, so again, their 10-6 record, you may think, okay, that's not bad. It's coming against some pretty good opponents. Tennessee will actually be their 7th KenPom top 100 team that they've played so far this season, and Vandy's actually 2-3 in quad 1 games. Again, quad 1 being, if you look at the net rankings, which is what the selection committee uses to determine kind of the quality of opponents. Quad 1 being, I think it's 1 through 25 in the net at home, 1 through 50 on neutral site, and 1 through 75 on the road. They're 2-3 those games. They've beaten BYU 69-67 on a neutral court. BYU ranks 27th in the net, 21 on KenPom. And they beat Arkansas 75-74 on the road. And Arkansas ranks 57th on the net and 38th on KenPom. So 2 pretty good wins. They also have 3 quad 3 losses, or 2 quad 3 losses, excuse me. So those aren't great at Temple and South Carolina. But Vandy's been fairly tested, and they've won a fair share of some pretty competitive games against some pretty good teams so far this season. On the other side of the court here for Tennessee, some positives in Tennessee's favor in this game. As I mentioned at the top of the video here, Tennessee hasn't had very much of an issue against Vanderbilt under Rick Barnes and have been pretty successful in Nashville against Vanderbilt as well. After some early struggles in the first couple of seasons under Barnes, Tennessee has now won 8 straight games against Vandy, and they're 10-3 against the Commodores under Rick Barnes. So 8 straight games, they're 10-3 against Vandy under Rick Barnes. Vandy has not been the same also, since Rick Barnes has been in the league, but still, Tennessee hasn't had much issue with their in-state rival the last few years. The Vols have won 5 straight games against Vanderbilt and Nashville. And fun fact here, none of UT's current players on the roster have ever lost to Vanderbilt in Memorial Gymnasium, which is where they play in Nashville. So none of Tennessee's players that are currently on the roster have ever lost in Nashville to Vanderbilt in their home court. And here's another fun stat here from Tennessee SID Tom Sakowiak that was mentioned in the game notes leading up to this game. The Vols have recorded 6 wins over SEC teams in Nashville, which is actually more in the last couple years than Vanderbilt has had. Tennessee has beaten Vanderbilt 3 times in Nashville, and they've won 3 games in the SEC tournament. During that same span, Vanderbilt's only gotten 5 wins in the SEC in Nashville. 4 home games, one in the SEC tournament. So Tennessee actually has more wins, SEC wins in Nashville in the last few seasons than Vanderbilt has. That's an incredible stat to me. Vandy also hasn't been playing great at home this year, where 5 of their 6 losses have come at home. And there've been some, wasn't like they've played a bunch of murderers row at home. They've played some good teams, don't get me wrong. They lost to Kentucky there, but they also lost to Temple at home. So, I mean, they've had some head-scratching losses at home, too. I also mentioned that Vandy's defense is solid, but Tennessee's is better. That game against Kentucky notwithstanding, Tennessee's defense has been very stout this year. It'll be one of the best statistically, and probably best just on the court, too, that Vandy has faced this entire season. Tennessee's defense ranks 5th on KenPom in defensive efficiency, and it'll be just the third top 20 defense in KenPom rankings that Vandy has faced this season. The other 2 were VCU, which ranks 2nd now, and BYU, which ranks 18th. VCU held Vanderbilt to 37 points in a 48-37 victory in the 3rd game of the regular season. If you guys remember that awful, I remember seeing the final score of that and thinking, is that halftime or is that the final score? But they held Vandy to 37 points in that game. And then Vandy beat BYU 69-67, so under 70 points, but still that was a solid BYU defense that Vandy put up 69 points on. Aside from that BYU game, though, Vandy has struggled against pretty good defensive teams this year. They're just 1-4 against teams ranked in the top 50 on KenPom and defensive efficiency. So that BYU game is the only one they've won this year against the top 50 KenPom defense. On the flip side, Vandy's offense ranks 114th. Tennessee is 2-1 against teams in kind of that 90 to 130 range on KenPom. The only loss coming against LSU. So Tennessee's had more success against kind of average to slightly above average offenses than Vandy's had against good defenses. Here's what that was an interesting stats. Our second straight time mentioning Josiah Jordan-James in a video breakdown, mentioned him in the Kentucky one over the weekend, or on Friday, I guess. When he's been productive offensively, the Vols have generally had some of their most success this season. When Josiah Jordan-James scores in double figures this year, so 10 or more points, UT is 4-1 with that lone loss coming to Kentucky on Saturday when he had a decent game against Kentucky. That's the only time Tennessee's lost this year, when Josiah's had at least 10 points in a game. When he has minimal offensive success, when he scores 5 points or less, Tennessee is 3-3. So you may not think of Josiah as being the most important player on offense for Tennessee, but if he's making shots and he's being productive enough to get to double figures, generally Tennessee is having success because generally someone else is also having success on offense when he's doing that. So he's kind of an interesting one to keep an eye on in terms of if he's having a good game. A lot of times Tennessee's going to have a good game, and a lot of times they're going to win. In non-conference play, the Vols were really good at not turning the ball over. They've struggled with that more and more as SEC play has gone on, turning the ball over an average of 16 times a game, and they actually had a really bad turnover game against Kentucky, but that 16 times per game is 3rd most in SEC play. That's a big reason why the Vols are just 2-3 in conference play right now, and the Vols this season are 1-3 when they've had 14 or more turnovers in a game. Mentioned at the top of the video, Vanderbilt loves to force turnovers, and they're really good when they've forced 16 or more in a game. Can Tennessee keep that number below that? Because if they do, they have a better chance of winning. So Tennessee has to do a better job of keeping the ball safe. Kennedy Chandler, especially the main point guard for Tennessee, he's got to do a much better job. He's had some struggles in SEC play. Younger guy, so I mean, he's adjusting. But we'll see how it goes. But Tennessee needs to cut down on the turnovers. I mentioned it earlier about there are probably going to be a lot of threes in this game. And though UT's three-point shooting hasn't been quite as good in SEC play, and they haven't been shooting it as much in SEC play either, they're still attempting the 3rd most threes per game in conference play at 26.2. So right behind Vanderbilt, but Tennessee was attempting more in non-conference play, but still 26 per game in SEC play is the 3rd most in the conference, and they're making the 3rd most per game as well with 8.2 made per game. Vols aren't making the same rate as Vanderbilt, though, just shooting 31.3% in SEC play, but that did get bumped up significantly because Tennessee did just make 47.8% of their threes against Kentucky. When Tennessee makes 33% or more of their threes this season, they're 7-1. So that 33% mark is kind of the magic number. If Tennessee can hit 33% of their threes against Vandy or better, Tennessee's 7-1 on a year, and that really, really, really boosts Tennessee's chance of winning. When they've been held to 25% or worse from the three-point line this year, Tennessee is only 1-4. So they can't afford to have a bad shooting night, more than likely, although Tennessee's defense, again, has been very good, and Vandy struggled against good defenses, so we'll see. But It's not a good stat for Tennessee's favor if they are hitting threes. Vandy's three-point defense has been pretty solid this year, and 4 of their 6 losses, however, have come when a team has made 30% or more of their threes against them. So Vandy's three-point defense, not bad at all. It's one of the, I think, top half of the SEC, but when teams have made 30% or more of their threes against them this year, that's when 4 of 6 Vandy's losses have happened. So Tennessee, got to make your threes, got to not turn the ball over, and I think Tennessee wins this game. It's a very winnable game. Tennessee coming off being just whooped by Kentucky. Do we see Brandon Huntley Hatfield play more? Do we see less of John Fulkerson? Do we see maybe even more Jemai Meshack? How much of a change does Rick Barnes make to his rotation, to his lineup after that Kentucky loss? And maybe it's a soul-searching moment for him. Maybe it's a soul-searching moment for the team. We'll have to wait and find out. Again, at 9 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday night here on SEC Network. Thank you all again for tuning in for this Vols matchup breakdown. Let me know your thoughts below. Do you think Tennessee wins this game? If so, by how much? What do you think are the keys for this game? Would really love to know your thoughts. Again, like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications. Thank you all so much. Again, I'm Nathanael Rutherford with another Vols matchup breakdown video.